The Mafia boss didn't recognize his long-lost daughter in his new bodyguard. Hello everyone. Before we get started with today's story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon, so you never miss our latest videos filled with fascinating and unforgettable stories. It only takes a second, and it's completely free. But your support means the world to us and is the best way to help this channel continue to grow. Could you tell me where in the world you are watching this video and what time it is? Thank you so much for being here. We wish you and your family happiness, good health, and all the best life has to offer. Now, let's begin today's story. The brass shell spun across the marble floor as Elena stepped into Vincent Moretti's line of fire. The estate doors sealed behind her with a soft hydraulic thud, shutting out the city and trapping her inside the world she had spent 26 years circling from the shadows. White stone columns caught the amber glow of chandelier light. The air smelled of cigar smoke, lemon polish, and old money. She stood just inside the foyer in a fitted black suit, leather holster flat against her ribs, one gloved hand wrapped around the handle of a carry bag that held everything she could not afford to lose. Two men on the balcony above watched her with blank faces and earpieces. Another checked her credentials under a brass lamp, the paper edges whispering between his fingers. Vincent came down the staircase without rushing. His shoes made almost no sound on the marble, only the quiet friction of expensive leather. He was older than the headlines, broader in the shoulders, silver at the temples, his dark tie pulled perfectly straight. He did not offer his hand. He looked at her the way men like him looked at doors, exits, weapons. "You're the replacement?" he asked. Elena nodded once. "Temporary," she said. Her voice landed clean and level. She kept her chin still, her breathing slow, though the pulse at her throat ticked under the collar. She had imagined this moment in motel rooms, at bus stations, in the cracked mirror of a firing range. None of those versions had prepared her for the reality of his face being close enough to study, the scar near his jaw, the tired crease beside one eye, the absence of recognition. He glanced at the file in his advisor's hand, then at her again. Former military contract work. Clean references. No family listed. No one who matters, Elena replied. His gaze hardened for a beat, then slid past her to the carry bag. House rules are simple. No wandering. No questions you haven't earned. If I move, you move. If you stop, she said, I still move. One corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. He turned away first. That was how she entered his house, not as a daughter, not as a ghost, but as hired protection. The room assigned to her overlooked the inner courtyard, where a black fountain breathed water into blue tile under recessed lights. She set the bag on the bed, unzipped a hidden seam, and touched the envelope taped inside the lining. Old birth records. A faded photograph of her mother in a cream dress. One gold charm no bigger than a thumbnail, engraved with a tiny saint. She closed the seam before the knock came. Office. Now. The first night inside the Moretti estate did not give her time to think. Vincent was in his study 10 minutes later, lamplight warming the walnut desk, jazz low from a speaker near the bookshelves. Rain had not opened the story, blood had not either. It was the silence that did. Elena noticed it before anyone else, the vent above the liquor cabinet had stopped humming. Then came the smell, faint and metallic, not from the room but from the brass grate where the screws sat half a turn too loose. She crossed the rug without asking permission. One guard moved to stop her. She caught his wrist, twisted just enough to break his balance, then drew Vincent sideways as the hidden panel cracked open with a dry snap. A suppressed shot punched through the lampshade. Hot glass burst across the desk. The room dropped into darkness except for the city glow leaking through the tall windows. Vincent hit the floor hard, coat dragging over scattered papers. Elena shoved the desk onto its side, the wood groaning against the Persian rug, then fired once into the vent. A body slammed backward inside the wall. Boots pounded in the hallway. Men shouted. The smell of cordite mixed with torn fabric and lamp oil. Elena stayed on one knee in front of Vincent, gun steady, eyes on the black square in the wall. He stared at her for half a second too long, not with gratitude but calculation. She had just saved his life on her first night, and that made her useful. It also made her dangerous. When the house lights came back in a cold white wash, the dead lamp smoked on the floor between them. Vincent rose slowly, brushed glass from his sleeve, and looked at the guard Elena had disarmed. Then he looked back at her. "Change of room," he said. "From now on, you stay outside mine." The hallway outside Vincent's bedroom smelled of fresh plaster, gun oil, and the bitter coffee one of the night guards kept burning on a hot plate at the far end. Elena stood at her new post in the washed-out glow of wall sconces, one hand loose at her side, the other resting near her jacket seam where the pistol sat hidden. The estate had gone quiet after the attempt, but it was not the calm of safety. It was the quiet of men listening through walls. At 2:13 a.m., the bedroom door opened. Vincent stepped out already dressed, charcoal shirt buttoned to the throat, cuff links catching a thin line of light. "Walk with me," he said. He led her through a narrow service corridor behind the main staircase, away from carpets and chandeliers, into the bones of the house where pipes hummed and concrete held the day's cold. He stopped at the study door. The broken lamp had been replaced. The vent had not. "Tell me what you saw," he said. Elena crouched by the brass grate. The screws lay on the desk in a crystal ashtray. She lifted one between two fingers. Fresh scoring around the head. Not the neat pressure of a house tool. Something rougher. Faster. She smelled machine oil on the threads. Then she looked at the floorboards below the liquor cabinet. "Whoever came through here wore rubber overshoes over dress shoes," she said. "Cleaned the surface, missed the wax drag near the baseboard." Vincent watched her without blinking. "How do you know he came from inside?" She reached to the lower shelf, slid out a bottle of 12-year scotch, and revealed a thumbprint in dust on the wood behind it. "Because an outsider wouldn't know this blind spot existed." That changed the room. The two men behind Vincent exchanged a quick glance. Elena straightened. She had not discovered a new clue for mystery's sake, she had just turned his fear inward. Vincent dismissed the others with a slight tilt of his head. When the door shut, the study seemed smaller, warmer, thick with cedar and old paper. He moved behind the desk and opened a drawer. Elena saw only the velvet edge of what lay inside before he closed it again. "A bodyguard protects the body," he said. "A traitor studies the room first. Then stop testing which one she is," Elena answered, and set the screw on the desk. "Test who had keys to the vent access." Silence hung there for a beat. He did not raise his voice. He rarely needed to. "You talk like you've buried men for less." "She talks like she prefers the truth," Vincent's consigliere muttered from the doorway, having returned without permission. His name was Raphael Sartori. Mid-40s. Silk tie. Smile too smooth. Elena had noticed him earlier, not by what he said, but by what he never touched. No dust on his sleeves. No concern near the vent. He stayed away from the damage as if he had known where it would be. Vincent turned to him. "Who signed off on the maintenance crew this week?" "Facilities did," Raphael said. "Names are being checked." Elena crossed the room before either man expected it. She picked up the clipboard left by estate staff, ran her thumb down the signatures, and tapped one line. "This isn't maintenance handwriting," she said. "It matches the gate log initials from my arrival." Raphael's smile thinned. Vincent took the board from her, studied it, then looked up with something sharper in his eyes than suspicion. "Respect, maybe. Or recognition of value. From now on," he said, "she doesn't wait in hallways." He faced Elena directly. "You're in my close detail. Car, meetings, everywhere. If there's rot in this house, You'll stand where I can see whether it reaches for me or for you. Raphael opened his mouth to object. Vincent cut him off without taking his eyes off Elena. That wasn't a discussion. By sunrise, Elena was seated across from Vincent in the back of a black armored SUV, the cabin warm with leather heat and the low vibration of the engine under her shoes. City lights slid across the tinted windows in pale strips, then vanished as the vehicle turned beneath an overpass. Vincent was on a secure call, speaking in clipped phrases about shipments, schedules, names that meant nothing to anyone outside his world. Elena watched his hands instead. The left thumb rubbed once over the edge of his signet ring whenever he paused to think. The habit was small, almost invisible. It hit her harder than the gunshot had. Her mother used to do the same thing with a chipped coffee mug when the rent was late and she was pretending not to worry. Vincent ended the call and set the phone beside him. "You haven't slept," he said. "Neither have you," Elena answered. The corner of his jaw tightened as if he nearly smiled, then thought better of it. They arrived at a private warehouse on the riverfront where cold morning air carried diesel fumes, wet concrete, and the metallic tang of the water beyond the loading docks. Men stepped aside when Vincent walked in. Elena stayed half a step behind his shoulder, not close enough to crowd him, not far enough to fail. Inside, forklifts beeped in reverse, chains rattled, pallets creaked under shrink wrap. Vincent stopped to review an inventory sheet under a hanging work light. Elena's eyes moved over the room, the exits, the mezzanine, the catwalk rail. Then back to him. He signed with a heavy black pen and handed it back to the foreman. The pen rolled once on the clipboard, clipped itself against the edge, and Elena caught it before it fell. Vincent looked at her hand. There, just below her thumb, was a tiny crescent scar. The kind a child got from climbing where she was told not to climb. His eyes held on it a second too long. "How'd you get that?" he asked. Elena slid the pen back to the foreman. "Rusty fence," she said. "I was 8. The number landed between them. Something old moved behind Vincent's face and disappeared before it could take shape. Later, back at the estate, he called her into the breakfast room instead of the security office. Morning light spread across the long table in white bands. Silver lids steamed softly over untouched food. Fresh espresso sharpened the air. Vincent stood by the window with a cup in hand, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled precisely once. On the sideboard, a small antique music box sat open beside ledgers and a pistol. Elena noticed it because the melody was almost gone, only a thin mechanical note catching every few turns. Vincent followed her glance. "My wife bought that before she died," he said. "It used to calm the baby." He said the last word as if it belonged to another language. He set the cup down. "My daughter hated strangers. Bit a priest once." Elena's fingers pressed into the back of the chair she had not yet taken. "Maybe the priest deserved it," she said. A short breath escaped him, something rougher than a laugh. Then his gaze dropped. A gold chain had slipped free at her collar during the drive. Just an inch of it. Elena moved to tuck it back, but not before the tiny Saint charm flashed in the morning light. Vincent went still. Not the stillness of a man resting. The stillness of a man hearing a locked room open in his head. He stepped closer, slow enough to make the floorboards murmur. "Where did you get that?" he asked. Elena's hand closed around the charm. The metal warmed instantly in her fist. She could smell coffee cooling, beeswax on the polished table, the faint machine song of the dying music box. Vincent was close enough now to see the fine tremor at the chain against her throat. Close enough to notice that her eyes did not drop from his. He did not reach for the charm. He did something harder. He waited. And for the first time since she entered his house, Elena saw uncertainty break through his control like light through cracked shutters. "Answer me," he said, quieter now. "Who gave you that?" Cold air from the estate's east corridor moved through the breakfast room and stirred the edge of the linen runner. The silver spoon on Vincent's untouched cup gave one faint click as it settled, and the old music box in the next room finally died into silence. Elena did not answer at once. Her fingers rose to the Saint charm at her throat, not protectively, but as if measuring its weight. Morning light cut across the table and caught the worn gold surface, revealing tiny scratches from years of being hidden under clothing and pressed in nervous hands. "My mother gave it to me," she said. Her voice stayed level, but she tucked the chain beneath her shirt before his hand could move, and that small refusal shifted something sharper than anger into the room. Vincent leaned back instead of forward. The leather chair gave a slow creak. "What was her name?" he asked. Elena met his eyes. "You hired me to keep you alive, not to answer personal questions." For a beat, only the ticking wall clock spoke. Then Vincent gave a short nod, as if accepting terms he had not agreed to. "Fair enough," he said. "Then earn your privacy." By noon, she was no longer on the outer rotation. She was brought inside the private security ring, the part of the house where footsteps softened over Persian wool, doors opened with coded locks, and every servant lowered their eyes too quickly. Raphael was waiting in Vincent's study when Elena entered with the updated route sheet. Cigar smoke hung blue under the brass chandelier. The older man smiled without warmth and tapped ash into a crystal tray. "A fast promotion," he said. Elena placed the folder on Vincent's desk and noticed at once that one page in the stack beneath his hand had been moved half an inch out of alignment. Tiny details had become her religion. Someone had searched the desk and tried to put the room back together. Vincent saw her attention shift. "What is it?" She crossed the carpet, the thick pile muting her steps, and touched the corner of the displaced page. The paper beneath held vehicle assignments for the next 3 days. One car number had been changed in fresh ink, then changed back. "Someone tested your route security," she said. Raphael's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "Or someone wants the new guard to see ghosts in every shadow." Elena did not look at him. "Ghosts don't forge maintenance tags or alter convoy sheets." Vincent's gaze moved from the page to Raphael, then back to Elena. The room cooled by a degree no one could measure. "From now on, all route changes go through her first," Vincent said. The words landed with more force than a raised voice. Raphael's smile disappeared. In the hours that followed, Elena moved through the private wing with a tablet, a ring of keys, and a memory sharp enough to notice what others assumed would be ignored. A pantry door near the service stair had fresh scrape marks near the latch. A camera outside the west veranda had a 2-minute gap in archived feed. One of Vincent's trusted drivers claimed he had worked late Tuesday, but the garage log showed the engine on his sedan was still warm at 3:10 a.m. not from work, but from movement off-site. She did not collect clues like trophies. She used them to tighten the circle. By evening she had reassigned posts, switched Vincent's dinner room twice, and sent 2 guards home under the excuse of protocol review. The estate changed shape around her. Men who had worked there 10 years began waiting for her nod before opening a door. Vincent watched this from the threshold of his office, coat off, sleeves rolled, the amber light behind him making his face look carved from old stone. "You run my house like you've lived in it before," he said. Elena slid a fresh earpiece onto the desk without looking up. "No. Like someone wanted you dead in it." That night proved her right. Rain tapped against the tall windows of Vincent's private sitting room while a fire hissed low in the grate. He had just reached for a file when Elena caught the reflection first, a figure where there should have been none, moving in the dark glass behind him. "Down," she snapped. Vincent dropped without hesitation. The lamp on the side table burst, showering the rug with sparks and glass as a suppressed shot punched through the room. Elena overturned the armchair into the line of fire, dragged Vincent behind the marble hearth, and hit the emergency blackout. Darkness swallowed the room except for the red ember of the fire and the thin green exit strips near the floor. Guards thundered in the corridor seconds later, too late. The shooter was gone through a servant's passage someone inside had unlocked. smoke, rain, and hot dust filled the air. Vincent looked at Elena across the hearth, his breathing rough but controlled, a streak of lamplight bloodless across his cheek. She had one hand braced on the marble, the other around her pistol, and for the first time he was not looking at her like an employee. He was looking at the person who had just kept his heart beating. Then the study door opened again, and Raphael stepped into the broken light with 6 armed men behind him. His eyes went to Elena first. "From this moment on," he said, voice cool as wet steel, "no one stands near Vincent Moretti unless I approve it." Neon from the club sign bled red and violet across the rain-slick sidewalk, turning puddles into trembling pools of color. Bass rolled through the brick walls in slow violent waves, and somewhere under the perfume, whiskey, and wet wool coats, the sharp metallic smell of storm air kept slipping in each time the door opened. The challenge Raphael made inside the estate did not end there. Vincent answered it 3 hours later by bringing Elena with him anyway. The black SUV cut through Manhattan traffic with wipers beating a hard rhythm over the windshield. Raphael sat in the front passenger seat, silent and rigid, while Elena rode beside Vincent in the back, one gloved hand near the inside handle, eyes moving over mirrors, rooftops, alley mouths, and reflections in every storefront they passed. "This meeting was arranged before the attack," Raphael said at last, not turning around. "Canceling would look weak." Vincent adjusted the cuff of his charcoal shirt and looked at Elena instead. "Can you keep me breathing through one drink?" Her answer was a slight nod. The club belonged to Moretti in everything but paperwork. Velvet ropes, mirrored columns, private stairs, men at the corners pretending not to watch. Elena entered half a pace ahead of Vincent. Her shoulder brushed the heavy curtain to the VIP corridor, and she felt the hidden weight stitched inside it. Reinforced lining. Good for blocking sound. Good for trapping people too. Upstairs, the private lounge held low amber lamps, a polished black bar, and a view over the dance floor where bodies moved under strobe flashes like pieces of a machine. Vincent took the table with his back to the wall out of habit. Elena did not stand behind him. She moved to the side window, checked the alley 3 stories below, then to the service door, then back again. He noticed. "You don't trust the room." "No," she said. "I trust exits." The first 15 minutes passed in talk of shipments and port schedules, the kind of conversation built from calm voices and unfinished threats. Then the lights cut. Not the music. Not the floor below. Only the private level. Darkness rushed in so fast the air seemed to change temperature. Elena moved before the room had time to understand what was happening. She shoved Vincent sideways off the booth just as glass exploded inward from the alley-facing window. The shot missed him by inches and smashed the bottle display instead. Liquor and crystal rained across the floor in a cold sharp spray. Someone in the corridor shouted. Someone else fired back toward the alley. Elena dragged Vincent behind the bar, crouched low, and grabbed the emergency handset from under the counter. Dead. The line had been killed first. "Stay down," she said. Vincent was already reaching for the compact pistol under the shelf. His expression did not break, but his tie was half loose now, one dark strand of hair fallen across his forehead, making him look for a second less like a king and more like a man who had run out of people to trust. The service door burst open. Not an attacker. 2 of Vincent's own guards, breathing hard, weapons drawn too late. Elena's gaze flicked to their sleeves, their shoes, the wet hem of one pant leg. "Not them," she said quietly. The shooter came through the alley prep point. Vincent followed her eyes. A side stare. Delivery access. Prearranged. Sirens began to rise somewhere far off, blurred by rain. He stood, brushing glass from his shoulder, and looked through the shattered window toward the alley below where brake lights vanished into the street. "We leave now." The retreat through the kitchen level was hot, bright, and loud. Steam rolled from industrial sinks. Cooks flattened themselves against stainless steel counters as Vincent and Elena moved past. Then the first real pause came in the freight elevator bay, where the building hummed around them and fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. No music. No audience. Just breath, metal, and the smell of oil. Vincent looked at her throat. The charm had slipped free again in the struggle, resting against the black fabric of her shirt. When the lights went out, he said, "You knew exactly where they'd come from." Elena kept her eyes on the closing service hallway. "Because someone planned the room, not the shot." "And my men?" "A beat. At least one of them helped shape the kill box." The elevator doors opened with a hard chime. Before stepping inside, Vincent caught her wrist, not violently, not to stop her, just enough to make her face him. The Saint charm glinted between them. Rainwater from the broken window had dried cold on his sleeve, and his thumb hovered a fraction from the chain. "From now on," he said, low enough that only she could hear, "you don't leave my side. Not at the house. Not in the car. Nowhere." Dust lifted in pale ribbons when the old file drawer came open, and the stale air inside the storage room smelled like paper, metal, and years no one wanted touched. A fluorescent tube above the archive table flickered with a faint electric buzz, washing everything in a sick white blue that made the folders look almost gray. The order Vincent gave after the club attack changed the geometry of Elena's days. She stayed beside him through breakfast, meetings, cars, and guarded hallways, but at 2:15 a.m., when the estate settled into the soft mechanical hum of security vents and distant generators, she used a 7-minute gap created by her own revised patrol schedule to slip into the records room beneath the West Wing. She had not come to the house only to save him. She had come to find what had been buried with her mother's life. The keycard she borrowed from an accounting clerk opened the outer door. The inner cabinet took a thin metal strip in steady hands. Inside were acquisition files, old shell company ledgers, and sealed legal packets from nearly 20 years earlier. Elena worked quickly, latex gloves whispering against paper. Moretti Holdings. Midtown Property Transfer. Harbor Cleanup Trust. Then a name. Sophia Vale. The file stopped her breath for 1 second and no more. Her mother's signature sat at the bottom of a settlement page under a lamp-burned corner, dated 6 months before the disappearance Vincent had never stopped carrying like a wound. There was no marriage certificate. No family acknowledgement. Just payment routed through 3 companies and a non-disclosure agreement tied to a townhouse lease, medical coverage, and relocation. Her mother had not been protected. She had been managed. Elena turned another page and found a typed incident memo with half the details blacked out. Vehicle intercepted. Child missing. Exposure risk contained. The sentence was so cold it made the room feel colder. A floorboard groaned outside. Elena closed the file, slid it into a courier envelope, and stepped behind the shelving just as the door opened. Vincent came in alone. Not in a suit this time. Dark slacks, open collar, coat thrown over one shoulder, fatigue sitting in the lines beside his mouth. He had followed the missing patrol pattern, not the woman herself. "You rewrote the overnight rotations," he said quietly, eyes moving once around the room. "Only one reason to leave yourself a blind spot." Elena stepped back into the light with the envelope tucked against her side. "You shouldn't be here without me. And yet here we are." The fluorescent lamp hissed overhead. Dust floated between them like ash. Vincent's gaze dropped to the envelope. "What did you take?" Elena could have lied. Instead, she set the packet on the table and pulled one page free. The paper made a dry crackle in the silence. She turned it so he could see the signature. Sophia Vale. The name seemed to strike him physically. His hand did not touch the page, but his fingers curled once, hard enough for the knuckles to pale. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "From your basement," Elena said. "From your companies. From the years you buried." The old fluorescent light sharpened the scar near his jaw and the gray at his temples. He looked older in that room, not weaker, just less armored. Sophia took that agreement because I told my people to keep her hidden until I could fix what was around me, he said. I was building enemies faster than I could bury them. Elena slid the redacted memo toward him. And when the car was intercepted? When the child vanished. Vincent read only the first line before his face changed. It was not surprise at the event. It was recognition of the wording, of who had written it, of what had been done in his name. This report never came to me, he said. It would have. No, his voice dropped, rough and certain. Not like this. This was cleaned. Shortened. Meant to close a door. The room held still around them, filled only by the hum of the ballast and the faint ping of cooling pipes. Elena watched him absorb the page, watched memory move behind his eyes without fully surfacing. Not confession. Not innocence. Something more dangerous than either. Ownership without the whole truth. Your empire ruined her, she said. Whether you signed every page or not. Vincent did not deny it. He looked at Sophia's name one more time, then at Elena, and there was a question in his face now that reached farther than the charm had. Before he could ask it, his phone lit up on the metal table. Raphael's name glowed across the screen. Vincent answered on speaker. Static crackled, then Raphael's voice came thin and urgent through the room. You need to come upstairs now. Someone sent a package to the front gate. It contains an old photograph, a hospital bracelet, and a note. It says the girl you lost is already in your house. Cold fluorescent light hummed over the steel table, and the records room suddenly felt smaller, as if the concrete walls had shifted inward by an inch. The phone on speaker carried a thin hiss of static, then Raphael repeated himself upstairs, each word clipped and urgent. Vincent's jaw tightened. Elena had already closed the folder in front of her and slipped the redacted memo back under the stack before he turned. He took one look at her, at the small silver saint charm resting against the black fabric at her throat, and motioned toward the door. They moved fast through the west wing corridor, shoes striking old marble, the air above ground warmer and heavy with cigar smoke from the front hall. At the long entry table, under the chandelier's amber glow, the package had been laid open beside a pair of white gloves. An old photograph sat under a glass paperweight. Next to it lay a hospital bracelet yellowed at the edges and a folded note on cheap stationery. Raphael stood near the stairs, his tie slightly crooked, one hand still holding the security envelope. No prints worth anything, he said. Dropped at the gate less than 10 minutes ago. Vincent ignored him and picked up the photograph. The paper trembled once between his fingers before he steadied it. In the picture, Sophia Vale stood in sunlight outside a church, younger, smiling faintly, a baby wrapped in cream fabric in her arms. The image had been cut close enough that half a man's shoulder showed beside her, dark suit, no face. Elena did not move, but her thumb pressed hard into her own palm until the skin blanched. Vincent set the photograph down and lifted the bracelet. The tiny plastic band clicked softly against his ring. Street Agnes Memorial, he read. Infant female. Vale. His voice went rough on the last name. The note was shorter than the silence that followed. You keep your enemies close. You kept your daughter closer. Vincent read it twice. Then he looked up at Elena, not as a boss checking a guard's reaction, but as a man measuring something he had refused to name. Where were you born? He asked. The question landed in the room like a lock sliding into place. Raphael's eyes shifted first to Elena, then to the charm at her throat. Elena heard the grandfather clock in the next room, the low crackle of the fireplace, the blood pushing in her ears. This was the opening she had wanted for years, and it arrived with the taste of metal in her mouth. Brooklyn, she said evenly. St. Agnes. Vincent's grip tightened around the bracelet. Your mother's name. Sophia Vale. Raphael took one step forward. Boss, this is exactly what they want. They send a story, a photo, a bracelet from 30 years ago, and suddenly the woman closest to you becomes untouchable. Elena turned toward him before Vincent could answer. Untouchable? Her voice stayed quiet, which made Raphael's sound louder when he snapped back that the timing was too perfect, that enemies planted sentiment when bullets failed. Vincent said nothing. The chandelier light cut sharp lines across his face while he studied Elena as if all the weeks behind them had been rearranged in a single minute. Then he did something that changed the air in the room. He pulled his own gun from the back of his waistband and laid it on the table between them, metal against wood, a hard deliberate sound. If you're here to kill me, he said, do it now before another man speaks for either of us. Raphael stiffened. Elena stared at the weapon, then at Vincent. Her hand did not reach for the gun. It went instead inside her jacket, slow enough to make every guard near the doors tense. She drew out the folded copy she had taken from the records room and placed it beside the bracelet. I didn't come for that, she said. I came for the truth. Vincent unfolded the page. His eyes scanned the black bars, the surviving lines, Sophia's name. The color drained from Raphael's face before Vincent even looked up. Elena saw it. Vincent saw it too. And when Raphael began to back away from the table, Vincent's voice cut across the hall like a knife drawn from silk. No one leaves this house, he said. Not until I know which one of you has been using my daughter's ghost to bury me. Rain hit the warehouse roofs at the docks like handfuls of nails, sharp and uneven, while harbor fog dragged low over the water and blurred the orange port lights into smears. The convoy had been rerouted twice in less than an hour, and that alone told Elena the lock on the estate had not solved anything. Vincent stood under the corrugated awning of Pier 9 with seawater wind flattening his coat against his frame, one hand pressed to the folded note from the package inside his pocket. Elena stayed half a step behind him, close enough to intercept, far enough to move. Across the slick concrete, headlights cut white lanes through the mist. A black sedan rolled to a stop near stacked cargo containers, and 3 men stepped out. The one in the middle did not hurry. He carried an umbrella he never opened. You always did prefer family drama to business, Vincent, he called, voice drifting over the slap of water against pylons. Vincent did not answer at first. Raphael, standing to the left with 2 guards, shifted his weight on the wet ground. Elena caught it. Not nervousness. Readiness. The old rival spoke again, louder now. Ask your consigliere who sent men through your private corridors. Ask him who kept Sophia quiet after she begged to leave. The rain seemed colder after that. Vincent turned his head only slightly, enough for Elena to see the muscle move in his jaw. Raphael raised both hands with a thin smile that never reached his eyes. He's buying time, he said. He wants you looking at me while his shooters line the roofs. Elena did not look up. She looked at the puddle near the steel post beside Raphael's shoe and saw the reflection first, a suppressed muzzle easing from behind a crate not 30 feet behind Vincent. Down, she said. Vincent moved because her voice had trained his body faster than his doubts could stop him. She slammed her shoulder into him, driving him behind a forklift as the first shot cracked through the rain and burst a shower of sparks from the metal railing. Guards shouted. Tires squealed somewhere near the gate. The dock exploded into motion, but Elena did not chase the shooter. She pivoted toward Raphael. He was already backing toward the sedan, one hand inside his coat. You knew the route, she said, closing the distance over slick concrete. He drew, but Vincent, from one knee behind the forklift, fired first. The bullet struck the sedan window instead of flesh, glass webbing white. Raphael flinched. That beat was enough. Elena hit his wrist aside, the gun skidding over wet cement into a puddle black with oil. The umbrella from the rival's hand rolled away in the wind. Men on both sides froze just long enough to understand the center had shifted. Raphael's face went bare under the dock lights. Sophia was supposed to disappear, he snapped, rain running from his brow to his mouth. The child too. It kept the house stable. It kept him strong. Vincent rose slowly behind Elena, breathing hard, his coat dark with rain and harbor grit. You made that choice for me, he asked. Raphael laughed once, brittle and ugly. You let men like me make it for years. Elena heard the line and felt it strike deeper than the shot meant for Vincent. The rival across the dock started to retreat, seeing the real fracture was no longer useful to witness. Raphael twisted suddenly, snatched a narrow blade from his sleeve, and lunged not at Vincent but at the evidence hanging at Elena's throat, as if cutting away the charm could still sever the truth. Elena caught his arm, but the wet concrete slipped under her boots. The blade flashed silver under the port lights. Vincent moved without command, stepping into the line of it, knocking Raphael sideways into the steel side of the container with a hollow bang that echoed over the water. For one stunned second, all Elena saw was Vincent's hand clamped over his own side and rain washing pink from between his fingers. He looked at her, not at the men, not at the guns, only at her. Enough, he said through his teeth, turning toward the guards who still answered to him. Take Raphael alive. Then he pulled his blood-wet hand away, looked at the Saint Charm in Elena's fist, and asked the question he had been outrunning since the package reached his gate. Tell me now, he said, rain striking his face like thrown gravel. Is Sophia Vale your mother? Salt wind moved through the broken seam of the warehouse door, carrying diesel, rain, and the faint rust smell of the docks, while a single work lamp threw hard white light over the concrete floor. Vincent sat on a wooden crate with his coat removed and a clean towel pressed against the cut at his side. The medic had wrapped him tight and retreated when Vincent told everyone else to get out. Beyond the half-open door, boots scraped, chains clinked, and then even those sounds thinned. Inside the room, only Elena remained, water still darkening the shoulders of her black jacket. The Saint Charm hung from her fist now instead of her neck. Vincent looked at it before he looked at her. Answer me, he said, quieter than he had at the pier. Elena crossed the floor slowly, each step clicking over old concrete. She placed the charm, the hospital bracelet, and the photograph in a line on the crate beside him. Under the lamp, silver flashed, plastic gleamed dull yellow, and Sophia's face looked almost alive in the faded print. Yes, Elena said. Sophia Vale was my mother. Vincent closed his eyes once, not long, just enough for the truth to enter without defense. When he opened them again, they had changed. She reached into her jacket and pulled out one more thing, a worn envelope softened at the corners from years of handling. She kept this, Elena said. For me. Vincent took it carefully, like something already half-broken. Inside was a birth certificate with parts water-stained but legible enough. Father, Vincent Moretti. The room held still. No gunshot had ever stripped him as bare as that line of ink. His thumb dragged over Sophia's signature, then stopped when the paper shook. Elena watched him absorb it and did not step in to soften the blow. She said your world swallowed everything around it, Elena said. She said men came after her when she tried to leave. She spent years looking over her shoulder. Then she died before she could tell me whether you were the one who ordered it or the one too powerful to notice. Vincent lowered the paper. The lamp carved deep shadows under his eyes. I knew she was being watched, he said at last. I told myself it was protection. I let Raphael and men like him handle the rest because I did not want weakness near my name. That is the truth. The confession did not ask forgiveness. It only sat there between them, cold and plain. Outside, a muffled shout rose and was cut off as guards dragged someone farther down the dock. Vincent turned his head toward the sound, then back to Elena. Raphael built half my quiet channels, he said. By dawn, none of them will belong to him. He pushed himself up despite the pain and walked to the metal table near the wall, where a radio and 2 phones had been left. His hand left a faint red mark on the towel at his side, but his voice never shook when he started giving orders. Freeze all offshore transfers. Pull every captain tied to Raphael. Lock the safe houses. Bring the books. The empire that had hidden his sins began changing shape in real time, one command at a time, under the bare warehouse light. Elena listened without interrupting. This was not rescue. It was cost. When he finished, Vincent set the radio down and faced her fully. If you walk away tonight, he said, you walk away from a man who deserved it. He took the ring from his right hand, the heavy gold Moretti crest he had worn for decades, and placed it on the crate beside her mother's photograph. If you stay, you do not stay as my guard. Elena looked at the ring, then at the blood-stained towel, then at the birth certificate in his hand. All the years between loss and this room seemed to narrow into a single breath. She picked up the photograph first. Then the bracelet. Last, after a long silence filled by rain ticking against sheet metal, she pushed the crest ring back toward him. A father, she said, voice steady as steel cooling in dark water, not a king. Vincent stared at the ring, then gave the smallest nod of his life. When he lifted his eyes to hers again, there was no command in them, only recognition earned too late and accepted anyway. By morning, the docks belonged to Vincent Moretti again, but for the first time in his life, the one thing he wanted to keep could not be owned.